I'm Natasha Kirchek, and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. Coming up in today's newscast, Iran is about to bring thousands of missiles right to Israel's doorstep. The Palestinian president sends a loving telegram to the dictator of North Korea. And for those of you who abuse your emojis, we're about to reveal why you may want to think twice before hitting send. Stay tuned for the latest news in Israel. Well, if you were hoping things were cooling down after the horrific violence and anti-Semitism in Charlottesville, Virginia last weekend, unfortunately, they're just heating up. White nationalism and Nazi flags are continuing to run amok in America, and now President Trump has just backpedaled on his controversial statements about the violence, going back to saying that both sides are to blame for the bloody events in Charlottesville.
I watched those very closely, much more closely than you people watched it, and you have you had a group on one side that was bad, and you had a group on the other side that was also very violent. And nobody wants to say that, but I'll say it right now. You had a group on the other side that came charging in without a permit, and they were very, very violent.
President Trump was clearly heated, coming under fire for his delay in specifically calling out the KKK and neo-Nazi movements in his first statements to the press. Here in Israel, leaders shared their outrage over Trump's disturbingly vague choice of words. A few days later, President Trump clarified his statement that he was clearly against the hate groups, but now he seems to have backpedaled, claiming that the counter-protesters against the white radicals were also to blame.
There was a group on this side, you can call them the left, or you've just called them the left, that came violently attacking the other group. So you can say what you want, but that's the way it is.
On both sides, sir, you said there was hatred, there was violence on both sides.
Well, I do think there's blame. Yes, I think there's blame on both sides. You look at both sides. I think there's blame on both sides, and I have no doubt about it, and you don't have any doubt about it either. And if you reported it accurately, you would say.
These words were met with praise from white nationalist groups around the United States, including the former head of the KKK, David Duke, who thanked President Trump for his statements. Many Americans are extremely troubled by the spike in domestic terrorism, which they feel is fueled by an administration that has repeatedly failed to condemn white extremism. But some Americans, like Paige Brashwell of North Carolina, have decided to take things into their own hands. Paige saw a neighbor with a Nazi flag hanging in his porch, and he took it upon herself to investigate.
What's up with the Nazi flag?
Who are you?
Are you David?
Hell no, I ain't David. I'm Joe Love. Why? What's that goddamn
Joe.
flag got to do with you?
Why do you have a
What's it
Nazi
to you?
flag?
Do you make the payments on this fucking house? What kind of flag do you fly?
I fly a rainbow flag, thank you.
Okay, so what does that tell me about you?
That I'm not a Nazi?
I'm not a Nazi either. This is Nazi fucking America.
Is it?
Well, Paige's video of her confrontation is going viral, and clearly Paige believes that if people are going to openly display hatred like this, then it should be called out for what it is. Well, this is exactly what Israel was trying to avoid. Satellite images have just confirmed the army's worst fears. Iran has been building a missile factory right inside of Syria, which places an arsenal of Scud missiles dangerously within range of Israel. Unfortunately, this news doesn't come as much of a surprise. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad is one of Iran's biggest supporters, and experts have confirmed that this factory matches the same building construction used in Iran. That means this is a major cooperation between Syria and Iran to get ballistic missiles within range of Israel. Turns out this has been going on for longer than anyone expected. The factory is already well underway, under construction since last year, and expected for completion in just a few months. Experts believe the missile factory is armed with the Fateh 110, a medium-range missile that is effective enough to hit any target in Israel from the area. Now, you may recall our reports last week when secret talks between Russia, the U.S., and Israel emerged regarding the ceasefire deal in Syria. The U.S. and Russia agreed to establish safe zones, but Israel was against them, pushing instead to address the more long-term problem of Iran taking advantage of the chaos in Syria. Clearly, this is precisely what Israel was hoping to avoid. But before you get too alarmed, it's important to remember that Israel has been dealing and preparing for missile attacks for years. And just a few months ago, the Army unleashed its newest missile defense technology, the David Sling Missile Defense Battery, which is equipped to deal specifically with medium-range missiles like the Fateh 110. So as threats continue to grow, Israel is always trying to stay one step ahead. The Kurdish people have been seeking their own independent state for decades. There's a referendum set next month to decide on the future of a Kurdish state, but it's still an uphill battle for Kurdish independence. Well, it turns out Israel may be one of the Kurds' biggest allies in the fight for their own state. The Kurdish people have been scattered throughout the Middle East, adrift across northern Iraq, Syria, Iran, and a major region of Turkey. The fallout after World War I left the Kurds without their own state, something they've been fighting with both ink and blood for the greater part of the 20th century. But lately, they've also been one of the most active forces fighting ISIS in the Middle East, often forced to work alongside their other enemies in the Middle East in order to fight the Islamic State. Now there's a historic vote on the horizon, an international referendum which may finally give the Kurds their own Kurdish state. But it's a bit more complicated than that. The United States, afraid to trigger more instability in areas where the world is focused on ISIS, have asked to delay the referendum. But the Kurds aren't backing down, and now they've come to Israel, hoping Israeli leaders and the U.S. will throw their support behind an independent Kurdistan. Prime Minister Netanyahu has been on the record for his support for years and renewed his position that the Kurds are a brave, pro-Western people who share our values. Israel could benefit from an alliance with a free Kurdistan nation because it would be a major line of defense against expanding Iranian influence in Iraq. The Kurds have a month to gather as much support for the referendum as possible, and if the vote moves ahead, it could mean a big partner for Israel in the region. Now, here to help explain more about Israeli interests surrounding the Syrian civil war is Brigadier General Dr. Meir Elran, a senior researcher with the Institute for National Security Studies, and Professor Eyal Zisser, an expert on the Middle East and Africa from Tel Aviv University, and of course, ILTV's Aaron Porras. All right, so let's begin. Dr. Elran, what are the Israeli priorities when going into talks with the United States?
I think that Israel has three main priorities in these talks and also in general terms. The first one is what's happening in Syria in the long run, because the situation now is, of course, quite bleak. Nobody exactly knows what's happening and what will be the outcome of what's happening. But there is a sense that there might be a change in Syria to the extent that it will warrant some kind of an understanding of what Israel should do next or what should not do next. Right. In terms of the future interests of Israel. And I think that this is the first priority for Israel, is to understand and know what we should do in terms of our basic security interests. Now,
do you think the Israeli delegation is going to push for Assad's removal?
I don't think so, as a matter of fact, but I think that Israel would push to ensure the security interests of Israel in the direct proximity of the border, let's say in the Syrian side of the Golan Heights, for the future, because nobody knows exactly what's happening there, and more than that, nobody knows what will be happening there in the future, because the situation is completely under turmoil and changing constantly. So we have to know what will happen and in what way our interests are being kept.
Now, Professor Zisser, Iran is alleged to be building a missile manufacturing plant in Syria, as we heard in the news show beforehand. Do you think the U.S. or Russia is either going to attack that factory, or is it going to allow Israel or an Israeli unit to attack it?
No, I don't think that they are going to attack this missile factory. I don't think that they want Israel to attack this missile factory. Iranian presence there is with Russia blessing. I mean, Russia allowed the Iranian to come to Syria and have a presence and even influence. And actually, Donald Trump gave up the whole Syrian issue and gave Syria to the Russians. I mean, he's after ISIS. He doesn't care about Damascus, doesn't care anymore about Bashar al-Assad. And as for Russia, in the long run, they might not be happy about the Iranian president, but for the time being, Iran is there. This is a fact. They are not going to do anything about it. They accept Israel. They expect Israel to accept it.
What about the P5+1 powers and all the countries who were involved in the nuclear deal? Are they going to be upset or concerned about this? Is there going to be any sort of reciprocity or sanctions against Iran?
No, I doubt it very much. Let's look at what happened with North Korea. I mean, the Iranians do whatever they... And the world is not after Iran. Trump is, you know, expressing some concern, but is doing nothing. And actually, the world is ready and actually is eager to reconcile with Iran. The same thing will happen with Bashar al-Assad once the war in Syria comes to an end.
So this is really another reason. I said three reasons. One is the Syrian context, the other one is the Iranian context. And I think that Professor Zisser is, of course, absolutely right in presuming that Iran, for Israel, is a red flag. And Israel will do anything to tarnish the position of Iran. And here is another case. Okay, it's not just the nuclear threat, there's also the Iranian search for hegemony and the violent search for hegemony, partly also in Syria. So this is another interest for us, and there is a third one which I'm going to talk about later on, if you ask
Yeah,
me.
unfortunately, we've run out of time, but I think we have to bring you two back here because this is an issue that we can delve a lot deeper into.
Okay,
clearly.
let's do that.
All right, well, let's get on to our next story, friends. For the last week, it feels like the whole world has been dreading the fire and fury of a possible nuclear war with North Korea. Well, everyone, that is, except Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. Abbas has just sent a friendly telegram to North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un, wishing him health and happiness. Obviously, these are very friendly words to say to the man who recently threatened to nuke Guam. It's important to know that Abbas has maintained a close alliance with North Korea for many years now. North Korea has historically stood against the existence of a Jewish state, denying to even recognize Israel even until today, and recognizing the sovereignty of the state of Palestine instead. North Korea even sent pilots to fight against Israel in the Yom Kippur War and has been a major supplier of missile technology to Iran and Syria. Abbas made a special mention of this North Korean support for the Palestinians in his telegram, thanking the dictator for his long history of standing alongside Palestine to establish its own state with Jerusalem as its capital. Israeli politicians have denounced Abbas's cavalier tone with Kim Jong-un, with Education Minister Naftali Bennett comparing it to supporting Hitler and Saddam Hussein. The Palestinian Authority is in a difficult position, reliant on Israel for many key infrastructures, while also pushing against what it believes to be an unwarranted occupation. But for the leaders of Israel, some of whom are vocally for establishing a separate Palestinian state, it's friendly telegrams like this that make them question if Abbas is truly a partner for peace. In a small altercation gone horribly wrong, a former IDF soldier, Omri Dahan, has just been stabbed to death in Brooklyn, New York, over a parking space. ILTV's Aaron Forrest has more on the story now. Aaron, how does this happen? Tell us how this happened.
I'll get to that in just a moment, but I think first, our hearts go out to the Dahan family and to anyone and everyone who may have been hurt in or by this altercation. I mean, it's really, from all the reports I've read, it's really just a situation of when egos and pride and things get too hot. And
yeah, well, that tends to happen.
This was, I mean, it from the reports, it seems like it's a crime of passion. It was very in the moment, and it's a tragedy in every sense of the word.
Well, let's check out your report for some more details.
23-year-old Omri Dahan and his brother worked together in a plumbing business. The two pulled up to their home Sunday night, only to have their driveway blocked by a vehicle belonging to 41-year-old James Jean-Paul. When Dahan's older brother honked the horn to get Jean-Paul's attention, Jean-Paul, who was visiting a friend in the neighboring home, came out. An argument broke out and Jean-Paul called for more help. The argument turned physical shortly thereafter, with one witness saying the elder Dahan brother tried to hit Jean-Paul with a baby gate. As if things weren't bad enough, the situation took a sharp turn for the worse when Jean-Paul pulled out a knife, slashing Omri Dahan's brother in the arm and stabbing Omri in the chest. Omri died of his wounds in the hospital a short while later, and Jean-Paul was picked up by police on manslaughter charges at JFK International Airport on the way to Haiti. The American Dahan came to Israel in 2015 to serve in the army. and his fellow soldiers laid wreaths on his grave and posted eulogies to social media. Neighbors and friends described him as warm and kind.
A hotel in Switzerland has caused major outrage after visitors discovered anti-Semitic notices asking Jewish guests to shower before swimming in the hotel pool. And no, I'm not joking. To our Jewish guests, women, men, and children, please take a shower before you go swimming. If you break the rules, I'm forced to close the swimming pool for you. That's what the shocking sign says that was put up at the Apparatus Paradise Hotel in the Swiss resort village of Arosa. Another sign found on the hotel refrigerator says that Jewish guests are only able to access the fridge during certain hours. Unsurprisingly, Israel's Deputy Foreign Minister Tzipi Otoveli has already spoken out against the incident, expressing her outrage at the glaring anti-Semitic act. Yet the hotel is saying the whole affair was a misunderstanding and that there was no anti-Semitic intent at all. Management says that the fridge sign was hung because only Jews use the workers' refrigerator, and that the pool sign was hung because 2 Jewish girls once entered the pool without taking a shower. Well, the signs have now been removed, and the Israeli ambassador to Switzerland has spoken to the Swiss Foreign Ministry about the incident. But Israeli leaders are saying the removal isn't enough, since it's clear that anti-Semitism in Europe is still a reality that needs to be dealt with. It looks like Israel's first round of aid for Sierra Leone has arrived following a devastating landslide in the small West African country. Israel has sent enough food for at least 10,000 meals for the thousands of people that have been displaced by the deadly mudslides. More than 300 people have been killed and 3,000 people have been left homeless following heavy flooding in Sierra Leone.
And the worst disaster this way is along with ever net. Because if you join Ebola, the highest number of deaths per day within 24 hours for Ebola now 111 people. Even January 6th, you cannot see this kind of catastrophe.
From Siswa bomb, first year this was the kind disaster, then damage.
Picking them, the country woman don't lost their life. One green day, can you imagine? And this is not a family, different family, this is a different family. This is so hearted.
The Israeli ambassador to West Africa has been tasked with coordinating Israeli assistance in Sierra Leone, a West African country that doesn't have an Israeli embassy. 10,000 meals represented the first Israeli aid to arrive in the country, along with thousands of tins of baked beans. Israel has also promised to send in further assistance, including medical aid. And as always, the Israeli aid organization IsraAid has already had a team on the ground to provide relief and psychosocial support for those who have been affected. This all comes after the Israeli Prime Minister's announcement on Monday night to send aid to Freetown as soon as possible. Sierra Leone's President Ernest Bai Koroma visited the Jewish state in January to discuss sending an Israeli delegation to his country for economic development. Sierra Leone remains one of the poorest countries in the world, according to the United Nations, and its capital, Freetown, is hit each year with devastating flooding. Well, we hope he's ready for some good food, because Benjamin Netanyahu is now planning to become the first sitting Israeli prime minister to visit Latin America. And since he's planning trips to Argentina and Mexico, we know he's going to have some fun. Netanyahu is scheduled to visit the region before he flies directly to New York to address the United Nations General Assembly on September 19th. He should be back in Israel for Rosh Hashanah. The trip will actually end up coinciding with the 70th anniversary of the UN Partition Plan vote, when 13 Latin American and Caribbean countries cast ballots in Israel's favor, paving the way for Israel's independence. Israel's ties with Argentina have improved considerably since Mauricio Macri became president in 2015, which has certainly made way for this trip. And now that the Israeli leader is scheduled to visit Mexico, it seems like frictions between Israel and Mexico have improved, following the country's abstention in anti-Israel UNESCO votes last year. Have you ever wanted to take part in the fun of betting on a game with your friends, but you just weren't feeling confident enough in your bet to even make the bet at all? Well, those kinds of worries are a thing of the past now, and I have here with me Rudy Tzadok and Liran Freund, the co-founders of WolfBet, to tell us why. Thank you guys so much for joining us. So tell us, what is WolfBet?
Okay, thank you for inviting us. So basically, WolfBet is a social sports betting platform.
Okay.
It enhances the excitement and the fun in the procedure of betting. and it allows you to interact with other people, other users.
Interesting. So what sports are on the platform? Where are the users from?
So
what kind of bets are these?
Basically, we're targeting first the UK market, which is the largest market in the world.
Okay. Interesting.
Yes.
We're betting on sports. That's not a shocker.
And the users are from worldwide, but basically they're from the UK.
Interesting. So I'm assuming that you want to expand in the future, but we'll get there.
Yeah.
I mean, so what makes this different from other gambling software that exists right now?
At the moment, there are two types of sports bookies. I'll say it again. There's sports bookies that allow you to place a bet, and on the other hand, you have sites that allow you to get tips and provide tips for other users, more of the social aspect of things.
Okay.
But what we plan to do is to create a platform that combines the both. So users can share their tips, get tips from other users, and also place their bets.
And hopefully not lose money along the way, right? Okay, so how did you guys come up with this idea?
Well, actually, it was my idea at the beginning. I'm a Liverpool fan, actually, and I really like to see this team, not all the time. But it was like a year and a half ago. I don't bet often, but there was a specific match that I really wanted to bet on. So I logged into my account, and I looked at the interface. It was very boring. It was full of figures and numbers, and I looked for the fun. I looked for the excitement in the procedure, and I couldn't find it. So I thought about, hey, how can I make it more fun? How can I make it more interactive?
Right.
So that's how actually WolfBet born.
Interesting. Well, like you guys said, right now you're primarily based in the UK, but what is next for the company?
First, we need to launch the product. We're currently building it and starting with early adapters.
Okay.
But we're going to launch in 6 months from now a beta version in the UK market.
Beautiful. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. And there's somebody that you wanted to thank as well, so I'll remind you.
Yes. I really want to say great thanks to Ono Academic College with its Accelerator Internship program.
Beautiful.
Special thanks to Yair, Gil, and Zvika, who were our mentors and made WolfBet actually what it's today. So I really delightful.
Well, we hope you guys are listening to this interview. All right. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you, Natasha.
All right, there's nothing wrong with adding a happy smiley face to your emails and text messages, right? Actually, wrong. Israeli and Dutch researchers have just released a new study showing that smileys can actually end up harming the person who uses them. People tend to assume that a smiley is a virtual smile, but the findings of this study claim that in initial interactions, that's actually incorrect. A smiley can really only replace a smile when you already know the other person, according to the researchers. The study has been published in the Journal of Social, Psychological, and Personality Science, and it includes 549 participants from 29 different countries. They were asked to read work-related emails from people that they didn't know, and then evaluate the competence and warmth of the sender. Wondering what the results were? Well, an email with a photograph of a smiling sender was generally perceived as more competent and friendly in the work environment, whereas a work email with a smiley was perceived as less competent. That's also because including smileys reportedly ended up resulting in shorter and less detailed responses. So the bottom line, save your smileys for social media.
Enroll in eTeacher's online Hebrew courses and quickly discover that it creates the deepest connection to Israel that you could ever imagine.
Well, as we reported earlier, the world just can't agree on what to make of President Donald Trump these days, especially here in Israel. So in honor of the mess, today's Hebrew word of the day is diyun, which means a debate in Hebrew. So if there's one thing that Israelis love, it's a little friendly diyun or debate on everything from complicated foreign policy all the way down to where to find the best hummus place. Now, diyun is also the Hebrew word for discussion, which means that if you find yourself in a diyun with an Israeli that's getting a little heated, don't worry. For them, it's just a friendly chat. And with all kinds of crazy diyunim or debates out there, I'm here to finally put the greatest diyun of all time to rest. The egg most certainly came before the chicken. Or did it?
The weather is brought to you by international singer-songwriter Sabina. Make sure to check out her latest album, Purple Ribbons, and get updated for upcoming concerts.
Let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight will be clear to partly cloudy with a low of 76 or 24 degrees Celsius. You can expect a slight rise in temperatures to a high of 89 or 32 degrees Celsius. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.62 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for watching.